All right, well, we'll just start out with some introductions and then we'll go into the topic for tonight. So my name is Cindy Hansen. I'm the Education and Advocacy Coordinator for Orca Network, and I'll let our other two hosts introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Amanda Colbert, also with Orca Network, and I assist in the Education Department and our Langley Whale Center, so our education nexus on Whidbey Island here in Washington.
And I am Colleen Weiler. I'm the Jessica Ricos Fellow for Orca Conservation with Whale and Dolphin Conservation. So I work primarily on endangered species recovery for orcas, especially southern resident orcas, and I am down in Newport, Oregon.
All right. So I think what we'll do is we'll start out with Amanda telling us a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get into our topic.
Sure. So at this stage of the game, we never want to assume that everybody has joined a Zoom in the last year plus, although I'm sure most of the folks that are here have. We're going to do things maybe a little differently tonight. So since this is a Zoom meeting and we do want your participation at some point, but we do have some items to present to you first, we're actually going to mute everybody and take away the ability to unmute yourself just for a short while. And the reason being is because while we've had some Orca Month events that have been, posted widely and have been attended pretty well, we've had some folks that come in at the last minute and Zoom bomb. And when they do that, it's very disruptive to the presenters. It's hard to get the folks kicked out because they can kind of just Zoom right back in. So in order to kind of keep the peace for a little bit, especially since this is a meeting and not a webinar, and we, set it up that way to be more engaging, we are going to disable that ability. Now, one thing that I do want to go over is that chat box down at the bottom. Cindy and I are going to be kind of doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff while Colleen is presenting at first. But if you have questions or you want clarifications on any point that she is making during her part of the presentation, please, add those questions to the chat. We'll keep notes on that. We definitely want everybody to feel, comfortable with what's being presented and get you to absorb all of that before we go into the letter writing portion of things. So if that makes sense to everybody, once Cindy kind of does our formal introduction of Colleen, we're going to get down to what we've got in store for you guys tonight.
All right, thanks, Amanda. So just to get started, kind of the main reason we wanted to do this event is because there are so many issues surrounding the southern resident orcas, and we all want to do something to help. And this is a really great way that you can get involved, is by commenting on some of the issues that come up. So it's a really important and valuable tool for those of us who care about the southern resident orcas and want to get involved. So it's an opportunity to speak up as a stakeholder, as a constituent, let your voice be heard. And a really good example of this just happened recently. I don't know how many of you were aware of the issue that was taking place along the Columbia River. There was a proposal to build the world's largest fracked gas to methanol facility in Kalama, Washington, which is right on the Columbia River. This would have been a huge contributor to greenhouse gases and climate change. The public outcry was pretty impressive on this. Governor Inslee was originally in favor of the project, but then he actually did a 180 and spoke publicly about his concerns, said he could not support the project. And just last week, the backers of the project completely abandoned the proposal. So sometimes it may feel like we aren't making a difference, but we really are, and your voice really does matter. So that's why it's important to be able to speak out on issues like this. So that brings me to introducing Colleen. Colleen Weiler is the Jessica Ricos Fellow for Whale and Dolphin Conservation. And I'm just going to read a little bit from her bio here. Her work concentrates on identifying effective conservation strategies and protective measures for orca populations off the west coast of the US and Canada, with a focus on the endangered southern resident orca community. After completing an MS in Marine Resource Management from Oregon State University, Colleen opted to stay on the West Coast and give up on ever seeing a whale in the Great Lakes of her home state of Michigan. So just on a personal note, I want to add that I work very closely with Colleen through the Orca Salmon Alliance. We've worked on many comment letters together, and she's just absolutely amazing. I've learned so much from her about how to write an effective letter. So I'm going to turn it over to Colleen to lead us through. Amanda, I think we need to unmute Colleen.
There we go. I was just typing a message to her. I was like, I can't unmute myself. It's a good idea because my event was one that got Zoom bombed, and trying to keep up on all of that. So thanks for patience and bearing with us for a little bit, everybody, until we do throw it to you to speak. But as Amanda mentioned, if we're keeping this pretty informal, I'm going to do a little bit of introduction on the topic of the Klamath River dams, which is what we're going to be talking about today, kind of as like a case study of the different ways that you can write a comment letter and reach out on proposed rules and regulations. We're going to watch a short video that does provide some good additional background on that situation, and then I'm going to go into the discussion portion. But it is pretty informal, so if anything pops up and you have a clarification question, or I said something that makes absolutely no sense, or I threw out an acronym and you're like, hey, what does that mean? Just raise your hand and we'll unmute you and get to you. And I'll throw some kudos back at Cindy for being such a great partner to work with, both in our respective organizations and in Orca Salmon Alliance, which is a coalition that both of our organizations are in. We actually just finished writing a comment letter together, and doing a lot of, as I was looking at papers and statistics, I was messaging Cindy and being like, hey, can you put a second set of eyes on this and let me know if I'm interpreting this correctly or if I have these numbers right. So it's always really helpful to have a partner when we're working on comment letters, and having someone else who you can bounce ideas off of and look things over. And Cindy has also signed on to some of the Klamath letters that we've been working on. So to provide a little bit of background on that issue, we're going to jump into Klamath River dams. For folks who might not be familiar with that topic, there are 4 dams on the Klamath River, which is in Northern California and Southern Oregon, that are privately owned dams. They are part of a system of 7 dams called the Klamath Hydroelectric Project, that provides power, essentially powered only, I think none of them are used for irrigation, to homes in California and Oregon. And when these dams were up for relicensing in the mid-2000s, so almost 20 years ago at this point, Pacific Corp, which is the private company that owns the dams, realized that it would be far more expensive to go through the relicensing process because of the upgrades that were needed to bring them up to date with safety and environmental standards, than it would be to actually remove these dams. And this is following a couple pretty bad years for both salmon on the river, for tribes and for irrigators and all the different people that depend on the Klamath River. And that launched a very intensive stakeholder process where a lot of different people came to the table and started trying to hammer out a solution. So the Klamath is a really good example of something that has been through all of the different paths of public comment process that exists. There was a legislative package. Now it's in front of a federal agency. So all of those are opportunities for stakeholders and for concerned citizens and members of the public to speak up and provide information and weigh in on topics. And without those voices, it's a big question mark what would have happened on the Klamath River, because there were so many impassioned people speaking up and taking action. We ended up with a pretty good solution that involves the dams coming down, hopefully starting in 2023. With the asterisk that it is still pending one final permit from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So it's been through the gamut. It's very close to actually happening. And this is something that would be incredibly beneficial to Chinook salmon in the Klamath Basin, which in turn provides more food for endangered southern resident orchids in their coastal range. WDC, my organization, first got involved in this issue when I started with them back in 2014. This was really the second topic that I worked on for whale and dolphin conservation. And this is when there was a legislative package in front of Congress. So we kind of did a twofold thing. We had a petition up on our website, which I'll talk about in a little bit, as one way to submit comments. And then we were doing outreach to elected officials, which is another way to submit comments or weigh in on an issue. And unfortunately, the legislative package did not end up moving forward. But because of the immense public interest around this issue and the power of stakeholders, an alternative pathway was identified. And that is what brought us to where we are today with a new agreement, the second new agreement, and the dam's pretty close to coming down. So I will throw it to Amanda now to queue up a short, we're going to show a snippet of a video that provides a little bit more on the background of the Klamath dams, the tribal leadership that really helped to push this process forward. And then we'll put a link in the chat to the whole video. It's about a 15-minute short documentary. We're going to show about a third of it. Again, just to kind of provide some background and some context. And if you want to finish it up, we can send you over to YouTube after the event and you can watch the rest of it. Uh-oh, Amanda disappeared.
Uh-oh.
Tech issues.
I can try to pull it up, but my internet's pretty bad, so I don't know if
I'm gonna say I think I just had the link, so I can do that. Thanks for your patience again, everyone. Tech issues are always, fun. I'm looking in the wrong, okay. All right, I should be able to get that pulled up.
Everything around us is all tied into this one beautiful place. And it just inspires us to take care of this place. And that ties into our values as Indigenous people. If you take care of yourself and make sure yourself is healthy enough to take care of your family and make sure they're taking care of themselves, then it should inspire everybody to take care of the land that we all need. It all starts with being able to catch that fish and bring it home to your family. I love being down here. I love seeing our family fish. I love seeing them drift. But how much longer do we have? Back in the day, you did this all year round. You caught fish in the spring, there's fish in the fall, and there's fish in the summer. But nowadays, it's only this one time a year where we get a really good fish run. And it's really sad because this fish run is so small, there's not gonna be enough fish pulled out of this river to give every tribal member one fish. So we do the best that we can to make sure that we share the fish that we do get with people who might not get the ability to come down here and catch it themselves. My grandpa thought he'd never see the day where he'd catch less than 50 fish when he went fishing. Now we come out here with 3 teams and we're lucky to catch 7 fish. But the reality of it is that our people need to be fed. These salmon are so important to everything that we've come to understand as Yurok people, that without these salmon, our way of life is impossible.
Being a Yurok person, the river is our lifeblood. It's just as important as the air we breathe. The Klamath Basin is really big. It stretches from southern Oregon down into northern California, then goes out into the Pacific Ocean. It's really diverse as far as the physical aspects of it. and also the biological aspects of it. Historically, this was the third largest salmon producing river on the West Coast. There's been significant declines in all anadromous fisheries to a point where some fish have been extirpated from this river system. There's probably a number of reasons why things have changed so drastically, but one of the main reasons is those dams that were put in and basically cut the watershed in half and took away 400 miles of anadromous spawning habitat.
These dams have such a big effect on our lives, and when you're younger, it feels like people are talking about like a monster or something at the head of the river.
They're not used for irrigation. They make a small percentage of what Pacific Power and Berkshire Energy's profit is.
Where rivers should be naturally fluctuating up and down, these dams are regulating the water flow towards one kind of stagnant flow. So it allows algae all along the bottom of the river to pop up and grow and just flourish.
At times, the Klamath River and the reservoirs behind the Klamath dams can be thousands of times higher than the threshold that is recommended for humans to be in. So the water is toxic, extremely toxic. And then that water is in turn released down the Klamath River.
The state of California says that you're not supposed to drink it, you're not supposed to swim in it. If you let your animals drink it, they possibly die. You come out with sores.
It's just become a part of our norm, which it shouldn't be. And it's sad to see. It's disgusting.
For like the next generations to come, my kids or my kids' kids, to be able to swim and fish and not worry.
Another very serious impact that we believe dams are responsible for is some fish disease issues that we have in the river. One fish disease in particular that we're really concerned about is called Ceratinova shasta. We call it sea shasta. It's deadly to juveniles. 90% of the fish sampled have this disease. Another disease aspect that is exacerbated by dams is a fish disease that we study here in the lower river called ick. It's a parasite that attacks fish gills. Dams warm the water unnaturally, and so warm water can lead to delays in migration here on the lower river, and we can get congregations of fish, and congregations lead to stressed out adult Chinook salmon, and stressed fish are susceptible to diseases. Ick is responsible for the 2002 Klamath River fish kill, where we lost over 60,000 adult Chinook salmon as they were returning upstream here. It was the largest salmon die-off in United States history happened right here on the Klamath River.
It was the saddest part of my life. So we believe the fishes are relative. So we're here to take care of them like they take care of us.
Every year there's this fear that builds up in us, right? That we're gonna see those fish, floating down the river dead and stinky again. And that hurts so much.
That's basically what started Klamath Justice Coalition and us getting together to start this campaign to undam the Klamath.
We've worked really hard for a long time on this, and man, it feels like we're just right there at the finish line to get these dams taken out.
We've dedicated years of our lives, our young lives, to give opportunity for the next generation to live on a healthy, dam-free river.
Unfortunately, we've had to raise our children in this way to have to fight for what we live for what we believe in.
Not because we want to, it's because we have to, right? It's an obligation for us to take care of this place, to take care of us.
Thanks, Cindy and Amanda, for unmuting me again. So that's a really good, it's just the start of a really great short documentary on the Klamath River. And I think that came out last winter. So kind of when the future of this very long and extensive process was back in question. But as that little snippet showed, this is an effort that has really been led by the tribes, and they did a lot. The Klamath Basin tribes did a lot of work in the mid-2000s to bring this issue to the attention of both the owners of the dams as well as other organizations and other stakeholders, and led the effort to have this discussion and to create an opportunity for other people and other interested parties to support dam removal and to weigh in on this effort. They started protesting at meetings for Berkshire Hathaway, which is the, the godparent company. I don't know exactly what to call it, but it's like the company that owns the company that owns the company that owns the dams. And talking about undamming the Klamath, which again led to this legislative package that was introduced. And that is when WDC and other kind of orca focused groups got involved and started to provide additional input and public comment. So I do want to emphasize there was a ton of work on this issue before the orca folks really started paying attention and weighing in on it. And we owe a lot to the tribes and to the groups who had already advanced this process so far along before we kind of started speaking up on it. And our job, essentially, or our role in this process, was to provide information to legislators and to agencies on the potential benefits to Southern resident orcas. So looking at both the stakeholders, the tribes, the farmers, the power company, other water users in the basin, and how it would impact them, but also the ecosystem benefits of how it affected the nearshore ocean ecosystem, including the endangered southern residents. So on that, with some background on the Klamath, I'm going to jump into another short presentation, just talking a little bit about the different kinds of comment letters. So like I mentioned with the Klamath, there was a legislative package, which involves outreach to members of Congress and elected officials. And now it's in front of a federal agency, which still has a public input opportunity, but is a little bit different than what you would do or say or engage with an elected official on. So starting off with, I can get my slideshow to work. Why be an advocate? Why bother speaking up and getting involved? Well, in addition to wanting to save the southern resident orcas and salmon, public policy is driven by and for the people. So the US is set up as a representative democracy, which means the people that we elect to be policymakers are working for us. So your voice does really matter, even though sometimes it might feel like it doesn't, as Cindy mentioned at the beginning with the Kalama refinery. And federal and state agencies are legally required to request and review public comment whenever they are creating a new regulation or amending or updating an existing one. So they are required by law to make that public and to take input from people that are concerned with the issue. Who can provide comment or weigh in on these proposals? Anybody. The public, NGOs, nonprofit organizations like myself and like Orca Network often use those opportunities to provide additional information. Independent scientists can weigh in on things. Industry lobbyists, other government agencies can even submit comment if it's on an issue that is related to something that might not be in the wheelhouse of the agency requesting comment, but impacts something else, like southern resident orcas are impacted by dams coming down on the Klamath River. And who receives those comments? They can go, as I said, to lawmakers, to legislators, or to federal agencies, such as all of the acronyms, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NIMFS, BOEM, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Army Corps of Engineers. There's any type of federal agencies. All of them have to take, again, input from the public when they do any type of rulemaking. And how can you submit public comment? So a lot of different ways. You can sign a petition. As I mentioned at the beginning, we had a petition going for Klamath River when we started working on this issue. You can submit comments on those proposed rules and regulations. You can send an email to a federal agency, a state agency, or elected officials. You can send a handwritten letter or a postcard, or you can give them a call on the phone. And there is some overlap in all of these. Sometimes you can, write comments and submit that to your elected officials as well. And I put together a chart with a lot of information, but we're going to go through one at a time. So kind of talking about the pros and cons of each way to provide public comment and reach out to these various entities, and where it's more appropriate for which one. So petitions are usually organized by an individual or by an organization, and is a pretty minimal effort for most people. You can click 3 times and get a petition signed. So it's pretty easy peasy. Petitions can be fantastic media and outreach tools to show widespread support for any one issue or a specific ask. But depending on the agency or the administration in charge, petitions might only be counted as just one comment on a particular topic. And agencies make decisions on the substance of comments, not on the numbers. So it's not that, they received 200 comments for a rule and 1 against, so they're going to go with the 4. They're just making decisions based on what is in those comments. But petitions can be sent to either agencies. Again, it is helpful to show widespread support for an issue, or to MOCs, which is members of Congress, which is elected officials. And it's, again, very helpful to say, hey, this issue that you're working on or you've engaged on, you have 10,000 people who are supportive of dam removal or of doing this specific action. Official comments, which is a lot of the work that we do, putting together technical comments, can provide really useful information and make that connection between issues. For example, Klamath River dams, the initial part of that discussion and that topic didn't include a whole lot of ORCA information, but by stepping in and providing that information, emphasizing this has an ecosystem-wide benefit, and here's an additional 20 groups who are in support of dam removal because it affects this endangered orca population, you're helping to provide more substance and more support for that issue. The con for that is that it requires a little bit more time and effort and a lot more research to actually make that argument and support the point that you're making. And again, those can be sent to either agencies through an official public comment period, or to members of Congress, which is really helpful to provide them with a lot of information. And then emails, letters, and calls, I'm going to kind of lump all of those together, because petitions and comments are, again, super useful and can help in providing information. But personal messages and you taking the time to reach out on your own are always more impactful for those elected officials, for members of Congress. They like hearing directly from constituents, and it's being a little more direct with them and more personal makes a bigger impact in their decision-making process. But as noted, the con of that is that it can be really intimidating, especially for the average person and the average citizen, to call up their lawmaker. I still kind of blank out when I am in meetings with legislative staffers because it is really intimidating. Even though this is part of my job and the work that I do, it's scary. And it's helpful to remember that they are working for us and we elected them and put them in office. So we have every right to be there and to talk to them. And that always helps for me personally, give me a little bit more reassurance that that it's okay for me to be there and for me to be asking the things that I'm asking them. And some tips, if you do this kind of outreach and comments, for elected officials especially, do a little bit of research into their background. If you are talking about a specific issue, look into if they have said anything on that issue before. If there was legislation, how did they vote on it? Have they made any statements about it? Did they tweet about the issue? Just be prepared with how it relates to them going in, because again, making that connection to their interests too can be really helpful. For the Klamath, for example, legislation was introduced. So when I was meeting with our Oregon senators, when that legislation was in Congress 6 years ago at this point, you know, had they expressed support for it? Did they do any press releases? Have they said anything about it? And that's helpful coming in to say like, hey, I noticed you posted something on the Klamath. Here's some additional information on Southern resident orcas on this issue. Governor Brown, too, for example, has been really supportive of removing the Klamath River dams. And so it's really great to follow up with her and specifically call out some of the actions that she's taken on the issue. And one of the example letters that Cindy shared in preparation of this discussion was a thank you letter that we sent to Governor Brown at the end of 2020, just kind of giving her an update on the issue. And again, just saying thank you for continuing to be a leader on Klamath Dam removal. Do your research on the issue itself too, and be prepared with information, but also be ready to give the elevator pitch. So give them the bullet points and the really high level talking points and the most important facts. And then you can always follow up with more information. Make that personal connection and talk about why the issue is important to you or how it impacts the member of Congress's constituents or area. Have a specific ask. Go in there with a really clear request and leave them with an actionable item. Do you want them to support or oppose a specific like proposed rule or legislation? Do you want them to introduce or co-sponsor a bill or take action to move something forward in Congress? Be polite but direct. Again, unless it's Mitch McConnell, then all bets are out the window. But remember that they are people too, and they're more likely to respond favorably if you're polite with them. Even if you have negative feedback for them and you're asking, why did you not support this issue that I really care about? What is your reasoning for that? What is your plan instead to address this issue? Don't swear and be rude and walk into their office throwing things, because that never goes over well. And then there is a lot of precedent in how to address members of Congress. So if you are sending an email or writing a postcard, it definitely helps to show that you took the time to look up the proper way to address them. And I know that that sounds like such a small point in detail, but it is actually, it is more meaningful if you show that you had the interest and you took the time to do that. And always follow up. Again, hit those high level points in your letter, in your email, in your call, and then send more information, especially if they've expressed an interest in it or if they responded to your message. Keep sending them updates and make sure that they stay interested and engaged on it and that it stays on their radar. And I used our letter to Governor Kate Brown as an example for saying thank you. So give them a shout out, especially if they take the action that you wanted them to take. And saying thank you is also great for support if they hear from the opposition. So if they need to back up their stance on an issue, it's great for elected officials to have in their back pocket, well, these groups and these people reached out and are behind me on this issue. And mobilize, get more people involved. Tap into your friends and family, have a postcard writing party, attend a town hall and ask a question, which both helps to connect directly with the legislator and gets the attention in front of other constituents who might not be aware of that issue. You can write letters to the editors. You can tweet at them. You can post on social media and tag them. They do have alerts set for their names, so they see what gets posted and they track all of that. There are really creative ways to call out elected officials on issues beyond kind of the basics of email, call, letters. You can get creative and do lots of things. And then don't be too picky with who responds to your message. If you get a staffer that reaches out to you directly, they are fantastic contacts, and you can really form a strong relationship with staffers who are the ones doing the legwork and digging into issues and putting all of that information together that helps their boss to do something on an issue. For agencies, so these are ones that will post somewhere when there is a proposed rule and have a specific comment period when you want to submit those more detailed comments. So do your research again, be aware of exactly what they are asking for in the comments or what the comment period covers. Sometimes they can be hundreds to thousands of pages long, so at least read the introduction or the point that is relevant to what you're concerned about. I think the last Klamath River application was something like 3,000 pages or something like that. So it's a lot. So, you know, stuff like clean water issues and temperature issues are not my area of expertise, but I can certainly talk about how increasing salmon abundance helps to feed southern resident orcas. So that's where I would weigh in on that issue. They often too, in these proposed rules, will have specific questions that they are looking for information or responses to. So those are helpful to at least see what they're looking for information. You don't have to answer all of those questions if you are submitting comments, but it's nice to know what the agency is looking for and can help inform what you're writing a little bit more. Tracking the issues, so comments and issues, proposed rules go through multiple phases of rulemaking. Klamath River, I think we're on the third or fourth round of public comment before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Issues like the Snake River and Snake River dams, we had 2 different comment periods last year on that. So knowing when and what stage a rule is at is very helpful. And it's a great resource to follow organizations like Work An Hour or WDC who can keep people updated on that, or signing up for news alerts, which I'll get into in just a second. You want to establish your viewpoint. So who are you? Why are you weighing in? Are you a concerned citizen? Do you live in the area? Are you an independent scientist? Like what is your interest weighing in on this issue? Present your argument, so outline the stance that you're taking and be prepared to back it up with information. And then cite that information. So you do want to provide your resources in this issue or in this rulemaking period. And again, in the letters that Cindy sent around as examples, one that we submitted to Federal Energy Regulatory Commission last year, 2020, I think, had a lot of details and a lot of citations. So we provided them with a ton of information. The second one, because it was a little bit later in the rulemaking process, we didn't need to rehash all of that again because we had already sent them all that information. So we kind of just did an update, reiterated our support for dam removal, and then reminded them of those comments by attaching them and just saying, hey, if you want to remind yourself of the impact on orcas, here are all these citations again. So just to wrap up, Finn, remember that all of this happens by and for the people. So public input moves public policy. And this is kind of the double-edged sword of the United States government and policy and how it works, because we do have this fantastic opportunity to weigh in on these issues. But that does mean that it takes a long time. So as I said, we had 2 comment periods last year on the Snake River, and it takes a long time to ask for public input and then to review all that public input. So it can move slow and it can be really frustrating, but that is part of the process of making your voice heard. And then I will post these resources in the chat as well, but just helpful places to follow to be aware of issues. And again, that like when and where to weigh in on things and where things are in the process. Regulations.gov is where these proposed rules are posted and where you can actually submit detailed comments. Federalregister.gov is the newspaper of the federal government and is where more details are posted. Publiccommentproject.org is a great place to just go learn more about how to submit a public comment and what goes into that process. If you don't know who your members of Congress are or how to get in touch with them, you can find that on govtrack.us, or you can call Congress directly and just plug in your information. I think all they need is your zip code, and they will connect you directly with your senator and representative offices. And stopping share. So I know that that was a lot, and we do have some questions already. So I think at this point, Amanda, you can allow people to unmute themselves. And if you guys have questions and want to ask them directly, just raise your hand and we'll get to you, or you can plug them into the chat and we can do it that way too. So first one is with Klamath Dam removal. Is there a specific state MOCs to contact? So at this point, the Klamath Dam, as I said, is a good case study because it's been through all of these different processes. So right now, there is no role for Congress in Klamath Dam. It's all in front of the federal agency. You are encouraged, and I say, go and reach out to Congressman Huffman in California, Governor Brown of Oregon, and Governor Newsom of California with thank yous and with support. California and Oregon signed on as co-managers of dam removal. And that was a big commitment for the states to take. And so it's great to support them in that issue. And never feel contradictory to say thank you on one thing while also scolding them on another. We can have that duality in our brains. So it's always good to just say, hey, thank you for supporting Klamath Dam removal. Can you also support this other thing that I would like you to take action on, like for Oregon, opposing the Jordan Cove pipeline, for example. So right now, Klamath Dam's no specific MOC, but great to say thanks to Huffman and to governors. And then hopefully FERC approves that pretty soon and we get dams down in 2 years. And then Lori asked the best place to research a legislator's background on an issue. You can go directly to their website. They will have press releases posted. You can just do a search on their website for that issue and see if anything pops up. Also just Google, just plug in their name and that issue and see if any press stories come up. I have learned in the last 2 years that policy is made on Twitter, which is a terrifying thought, but very true. These MOCs do pay attention to what they're getting tagged in and how many tweets and retweets and hashtags and all that stuff is coming up for them. So you can also go to their Twitter and search their Twitter and see if they have posted even any offhand comments on the specific issue that you're looking at. So internet has been a great tool for better or for worse, and a great place to research some of that background and see if your member of Congress has made a statement or weighed in on a topic before. And then you can follow up with that and say, hey, I saw that 2 years ago you tweeted your support for Klamath Dam removal. Where's your support been since then? Or what are you doing to move that forward? And that contradicts what I just said with Klamath Dam is not up to members of Congress at this point, but other issues are. So if you want to weigh in on other issues with your MOCs, look up and see if they have tweeted about it or done a press statement on it. And I'll go back. I think I forgot a couple of things on those proposed rules that I just wanted to mention while folks are thinking of other questions. Again, nonprofit organizations are fantastic places to get ideas for what to put in your comments if you're going to write specific ones. Federal agencies will post that they are opening a public comment period in federalregister.gov. And then there's usually a 30 to a 90-day window that they accept comments. So you do have a deadline on those, which is why it is super helpful to pay attention. I am signed up to get alerts when Federal Register posted anything on killer whales, on Klamath River, and some other issues that I'm tracking, that I'm not going to go check Federal Register every single day, but I will get an email alert if anything comes up with those keywords in there, which is super helpful. And again, those petitions, which are great, and I encourage everybody to sign them. And if you want to do that next step, organizations that post petitions will often have talking points for posting or crafting your own comments. So you can do the research from nonprofit organizations and get those talking points and get the research behind it and be able to craft your own. And they don't have to be anything super technical. If you just provide like 3 or 4 resources, again, they can be pretty concise and pretty to the point. You just have to have a little bit more of a well-crafted argument than you do for reaching out to your members of Congress. The agencies are required to respond to all unique and substantive comments. So this is again where the petitions get kind of iffy depending on the administration and who's setting the precedent to count those petitions. But so if you just submit breach the dams to doesn't matter which dams, to a federal agency in a comment period, they're probably not going to respond to that. But if you provide a reason why they should breach the dams, then that is something that they're legally required to review and respond to. And Katie asked, beyond the Klamath, are there other big projects we should be aware of and write letters for currently? I think next week, you guys are going to jump into one specifically with the proposed dam on the Chehalis River. So Southern Resident Orca specific, there's one comment period open right now. It closes 1 week from today on maintaining their endangered ESA, Endangered Species Act listing. They are obviously still endangered. They have not recovered. That is something, it's a proposed rule. So you can go to regulations.gov and it's just submit something that says they should obviously still be listed as endangered. On the legislative side, a lot of organizations are working on Snake River dam removal and Snake River restoration to help boost salmon in that watershed. Orca Month is posting a weekly action for people to get engaged all month. We just did Snake River last month. This week is, or last week.
It's Fraser River.
This week is Fraser, okay. And then coming up, I think we have one on the Skagit River or another river in Puget Sound. So keeping an eye on those as well and helping to weigh in on those. I mean, there's no shortage of issues to weigh in on this point for Southern residents, but those are some of the bigger ones at this moment. I think river restoration is just a huge focus for the whales to get them more salmon, essentially. And then Joanne asked, what is current or next for legislative changes to protect whales and dolphins and all marine life? That's a good question. And there's a lot happening right now in Congress on a lot of different issues that are either directly or peripherally related to ocean and ecosystem health or whales and dolphins directly. So the Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act was just introduced last week on World Oceans Day. And that includes a lot of provisions that protect marine mammals directly, either by new regulations for protections from large vessels through speed limits or slowing them down in key areas. It includes some development issues on better monitoring technology to track endangered whale populations and make sure that we're listening for them so that we can cue some of those vessel slowdowns. It also directs NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to develop climate impact plans for at-risk whale populations. So doing a little bit more planning for climate change and how it might impact vulnerable communities of whales and dolphins. There's the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which would reduce plastic pollution, which is peripherally related to the health of oceans and whales and dolphins. There's, let's see, checking my list here. Save Right Whales Act is not southern resident orcas, but will be reintroduced soon and affects right whales over on the East Coast. Representative Bonamici here in Oregon just released a bill on blue carbon, which is does impact salmon habitat. So it's kind of indirectly related to salmon and orcas. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a little bit hard even for organizations to keep up on everything. So I would recommend, again, social media or just following various organizations and seeing what they're posting on and what they're putting out for petitions or for calls to action on where we really need people to weigh in and speak up on issues. Yeah, and Cindy, thanks for posting that 5-year review. This is one of the ones that's the proposed rules in the Federal Register can be, oh, there's another one too, the fishing one, which also just came up, and I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, it can
I'm
be
looking
a little,
that one up right now.
Yeah, it can be a little intimidating, but it is so helpful to go to organizations' web pages and to see what they have available on it, and to read what is in the Federal Register and see exactly what they're asking for information on, because that can help break things down a little bit. Again, it seems really intimidating at first, but then you read what they're asking for and it becomes actually pretty simple. Right now, they're just asking, should the whales still be endangered? Which obviously they should. So that's a pretty easy, like, yes, they should still be endangered. Tina asked, what nonprofit website can I go to get reports of the impact of net pens to submit to Department of Ecology? For that, I would recommend Our Sound, Our Salmon is a coalition of groups led by Wild Fish Conservancy that is really focusing in on the net pen and Puget Sound issue, and they should have a lot of information. I know they have a ton of references available that you can pull from for your citations. And to just help get yourself a little more up to speed on the issue if you're worried that you're not fully clear on what's going on with net pens. And they can certainly provide a lot of information. And Klamath River, going back to our case study for tonight, and where stuff gets super confusing, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is a very confusing agency. And there are, I think, two docket numbers related to the Klamath on their list of proposed regulations at the moment. And so it's hard for me, because I've never dealt with FERC before Klamath became an issue for them, to figure out which one to weigh in on. But that is where actually taking the time and reading through those Federal Register documents and seeing, okay, what exactly is in this rule, this proposed rule? What are they looking for comments? Where am I best situated to weigh in on this? I am not best situated to weigh in on Clean Water Act stuff. That's not my area of expertise. But again, I can certainly weigh in on, hey, we support dam removal because it will help Chinook salmon come back in the Klamath Basin, and that helps feed the southern resident orcas.
Colleen, I'm putting a link right now in the chat to the fisheries issue that you mentioned, just in case people are interested in that.
Forgot to go back to that. Thanks, Cindy. So that's another issue that is, it's a proposed rule, and it is up for public comment right now, and that is amending the salmon fishery management plan on the West Coast. So it's exactly what it sounds like. It is salmon fishery management, so how many salmon can be taken by fisheries. And they are including a provision essentially for southern resident orcas. They're setting a limit that if projected salmon abundance drops below a certain number, I think they settled at about 960,000-ish, then, you know, it will trigger additional management measures to try and help provide the orcas with more food. A great place to find information on that is our friends at Wild Orca. They have been tracking this issue really closely and have a lot of public information available on their website. This has been like a 2-year process in the making, and just off the top of my head and off the cuff on this, on the one hand, it is awesome that they are considering the orcas in federal salmon management plans. On the other, they set that threshold of salmon so low that none of the management measures are likely to be triggered. So it's probably not going to be that helpful. So a great public comment would be, again, a polite thank you for including the southern resident orcas. This is fantastic progress, but this threshold is too low and you need to set it for the year that salmon were in a time when the southern residents were growing in population, not struggling to survive as they are right now. And I'm going to throw those links in for all of those federal government websites that are just helpful to review. And again, signing up for alerts, just keywords, is the easy way to do it and removes a lot of headache for yourself for having to comb through everything every day, because there are hundreds of federal agencies and they are posting stuff every day, and it's hard to keep up.
Anybody have any other questions? And feel free to unmute yourself as well if you'd like to just ask directly. But if not, I'll just give a huge thank you to Colleen for being here tonight and explaining all of this in a way that actually makes sense and just makes you feel empowered that you can really get out there and make a difference when you make these comments. So thank you so much, Colleen. So I'll just add, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Just thanks for having me and letting
definitely.
me get my policy nerd on.
So I'll just add, for this particular meeting, we were using the example of the Klamath dams. And as you heard, that process is, as of right now, going relatively well. They are slated to be removed. Next Monday, we're going to be doing another one of these meetings at the same time at 6 o'clock. And we're going to be talking about a new dam that's being proposed that Colleen mentioned a little earlier on the Chehalis River. And this is a really relevant issue right now. Comments are needed right now, particularly to members of Congress, Governor Inslee in particular. So if you're interested in learning more about that issue and kind of learning some tips on how to write these comments, please feel free to join us next Monday at 6 o'clock. And I will put a link to that Zoom in the chat as well. And we're seeing lots of thank yous in the chat. So thank you again, Colleen, and thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight. And hope to see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.